It looks like we still have a few people jumping on, so I'm going to give it another minute before we get started. All right, it looks like we're at 9:01. What do you think, Tim? Should we get started?
Yeah, I think we could probably maybe wait 1 minute, and then the first part of it anyways is kind of introductions, and if they were on before, they're not missing anything.
All right, we'll give it one more minute. All right, I think we can get started. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So my name is Amy Clow. I'm the Quarantine and Rules Coordinator for the Plant Protection Division with the Washington State Department of Agriculture. There's a few other WSDA folks joining that are going to be speaking today, and Tim Elliott, who deals with motor fuel quality and enforcement with the Weights and Measures program, and then Glorianne Robinson, who is the agency rules coordinator. So you'll be hearing from them, I'm sure. Definitely Tim a lot today. So we're going to be talking about non-proprietary interoperability standards relating to the electric vehicle supply equipment rule, and this is meeting 2. So next slide. So just to kind of go over the meeting controls again, just kind of as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. So please make sure that you keep yourself muted. Make sure that if you are going to speak, that you unmute yourself before speaking, and that's just by pushing that little microphone icon. If you're calling in, then to mute or unmute yourself, you would press *6. Feel free to ask questions at any time by either raising your hand by pushing that little hand icon or leaving a message in the chat. We're going to be monitoring the chat throughout the meeting. And also make sure that if you do raise your hand, make sure that you click that button again to put your hand down so that we know that you don't have another question. Next slide. And Tim, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, thank you. I just want to also thank everyone for showing up today and helping us out while we do this rulemaking. So the agenda for today is I'm going to go over the statute and basically just going to read through it. There's 4 sections to the interoperability part of the statute, so I'll just read through each one. If you have any questions, let's just answer those during, like, if about the statute itself. Let's discuss those as we go through the statute. And then after that, we're going to get into discussion of the actual goals that we're looking for the interoperability. And then we'll kind of have a chance to talk about OCPI, OCPP. Those are the kind of the 2 big ones that have come up. And then we'll also talk about any other protocols and standards that we want to look at. And then finish that up with any other possibilities for interoperability. That's more like hardware or kind of like locked hardware, stuff like that. That doesn't necessarily fall under a protocol, but it's would be kind of interoperability related. And then after that, we'll kind of just finish up with our general reminders about the rulemaking and whatnot. All right, next slide. So before we go over the statute, just kind of keep in mind when for the feedback that we're looking for kind of like the end goals and the objectives that we need to actually hit for when we actually do the rulemaking. What is the problem we're trying to solve and the benefit that's trying to be achieved. And then we need to help on ideas on how to achieve those goals. So if you actually have recommended language or some guidance on the language, we do want to hear about that. We don't have anything really in mind necessarily. We keep bouncing around different ideas, but we don't have like any models that we're actually working off of currently. So we want your input. And we also need to know how it affects you. That way, while we're working through this stuff, we know how we can try to minimize the negative effects and maximize positive effects while we're working on all this stuff. And if you have any data that you're willing to share, or at least call and talk to us about, even if you can't share it and you don't want to email it, but you're willing to discuss it with us so we can understand where you guys are coming from, we'd be more than happy to talk with you. All right, next slide. All right, and then the other thing that you'll notice on the top of the slide, so in the past we've been talking about the different sections. I noticed the end of last week that the RCW has now been updated on the website for you go to the Washington State RCWs and you look them up. So the number for interoperability is, and all this is in RCW 1994, but section 570 is where interoperability is now landed. So it's either section 6 of the bill, or it's now RCW 1994 570, and then 1 is the first section of interoperability. And I'm just going to go ahead and read through it. Interoperability standards provide safeguards to consumers and support access to electric vehicle service equipment. In order for Washington to have reliable, accessible, and competitive markets for EVSEs that are necessary for the movement of goods and people by electric vehicles, interoperability standards that align with national and international best practices or standards are necessary. Any questions on that section? All right, go to the next slide. Okay, this section 2. By January 1st, 2023, the department, in consultation with the Department of Commerce and the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission, must adopt rules establishing requirements for all EVSPs to, at a minimum, meet and maintain non-proprietary interoperability standards for publicly available level 2 and DC fast charger EVSE, and may review and, if necessary, amend the rules every 2 years to maintain consistency with evolving technology. The requirement shall not provide that any charger provider must purchase or license proprietary technology or software from any other company, and shall not be required that companies maintain interoperability agreements with other companies. I highlighted that because I know there's been a lot of concern about people saying don't do that. Well, we can't do that. It's and the statute saying that it has to be non-proprietary and that you can't be forced to pay or make some type of agreement with other companies. So we are bound by that in statute. All right, is there any questions on this part? All right, next slide. And part 3. For the purpose of this section, interoperability means the ability of hardware, software, or a communications network provider by one party, vendor, or service provider to interact with or exchange and make use of information, including payment information, between hardware, software, or a communications network provider by a different party, vendor, or service provider. So interoperability, it's a wide scope that we have authority to make rules on. Seeing no questions, Next slide, please. The last section, or last part of it. Exemption: the requirements of this section shall not apply to publicly available EVSE provided by a manufacturer of electric vehicles for the exclusive use by the vehicles it manufactures. All right. Not seeing any questions on that. We'll go to the next slide. All right, so now it's time we like to kind of discuss the high level general aspects that we want to think about and what we need to know when we're actually making the rules. So in the statute, it requires that the purpose of interoperability is to have reliable, accessible, and competitive markets for electric vehicle charging. So the picture shown here is actually something we got from EV Roaming Foundation, the people that kind of organize the OCPI. It's not just OCPI that's here, it's kind of all the different protocols and how they go around it, just something to help you to think about different things. And the slideshow will be posted, so if you want to refer back to this, it'll be there. But kind of what we're looking for is there any definitions that we need to define for making the rules around interoperability, and then the concepts that we need to consider and the desired outcomes. So this is where I'm hoping we get a lot of comments to help us out. And if there's any questions, just ask those too. So since I'm not seeing anything, I'm going to kind of prime. So like one idea, this is kind of really open-ended on this, but is a lot of it has to do with like payment methods to make it so it's kind of an essential, makes it easier for per se roaming type. So a consumer can roam. So I'm going to I'm just looking for any input, even if it's input that you think that we already have. This is the time I want to just discuss it all. All right, Justin.
Hey, thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. Appreciate this slide to kind of as in depth as it is to kind of visualize the conversation a little bit. I'll just start high level. I think one of the, and I guess I'll say I would encourage the Department of Agriculture to approach this section of the legislation with some caution for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, I think one of the things that we need to be cautious about is, these are this legislation could apply to public charging stations located on private property, right? And so this is a decision that a private person investing their own private capital could be making. And any regulations that limit the choices that those individuals have, it could limit the choices and could limit the amount of charging infrastructure that we put in place in Oregon. And so when we think about, one thing that's necessary in order to deploy charging infrastructure, that's site host and sites. And we need to make sure that they can align the service that they're going to be offering, that charging service, with their business and the consumers that they're trying to serve. And so that would be one, kind of a piece of caution is, making sure that, this could have broad applicability, broad impacts on the market, and really thinking through if at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is get more charging infrastructure out there, don't we want those site hosts to be able to choose the products that best meet their needs? Secondly, I think the slide is a good demonstration here of kind of the complexity of the technology. And this is, changing rapidly. and there's a lot of different kind of pieces that work together. On the payment standards and OCPI in particular, I think one of the things that I think the legislation, I'm glad that it says, it's not going to require that companies maintain interoperability with other companies. And we talked a little bit about this last time on the previous section. Is those interoperability agreements, have a lot of business, going on behind the scenes. It's not just about how you transfer information and those sorts of things. It is really about how different business models are set up, and making sure that those businesses have the flexibility to work with each other is important. So I'll chime in more, but wanted to provide that high level kind of thought and a quick thought on OCPI and the roaming agreements.
All right, thank you. Yeah, Michael put a comment in there about if any of the EVSE companies, or I guess it could be or service provider companies, could provide any concrete information on adopting open standards and public interoperability standards that negatively impact the choice, and if it could be a little more specific than just broad impacts. And also,
and Tim, this is Michael.
Yeah.
This doesn't have to be answered now, but I've noticed already in today's meeting, and this happened a number of times in the previous meeting about payment options, is that certain stakeholders will just speak to what is to me like unclear, like potentially horrific impacts to the market without providing concrete evidence. And I think in a rulemaking, we need to really try to focus on concrete examples, specific, discrete ones, rather than alluding to emotion-based comments. I just don't, as an agency trying to help you, trying to sort fact from opinion on this can be really a difficult exercise if stakeholders are just speaking in broad, kind of not calamitous terms. But I just noticed that trend, and it's just not helpful for a constructive conversation. So I would appreciate any sort of specific, discrete evidence that can be pointed to when talking about potential impacts to the market from any one of these 3 or 4 sections that we're focused on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And on the same, I would also play devil's advocate that does go both ways on asking for requirements on stuff that we like more specific on how it impacts the consumer or impacts the public, because oftentimes that's very, very broad or looking, well, this could in the future have this impact. And that's the hard thing on all this, is it's kind of on both sides. There's not a whole lot of concrete stuff right now. There's also a question from Andrea about autonomous vehicles and how kind of if this would include that. Currently, that's the first time I've heard that mentioned. I think it's kind of hard for us to address that currently, just because there's the autonomous vehicles really aren't in the market yet, especially EV ones, but any of them aren't there. So it's hard for us to address rulemaking on something that we don't even really have much of a clue on how that works. But if you have more input on that or have an idea, we'd love to hear it. It may be something for future rulemaking that we'll have to include down the road once they actually come onto the market or be coming onto the market. And seeing there's not a whole lot of other comments on this, even like I said, we're going to try to get this posted. Sometimes it can take a while for us to update the website. I'll get back to you, Annabelle, in just a second. Might take us a while to get up there, but you can review this slide and kind of look over it. And then if you have any other comments that you want to put, we're more than happy to receive comments after the meeting, after you've had a time to digest what's been discussed here and look over the slides, and then go back and do some of your own research. So, Annabelle?
Thanks, Tim. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thanks. I just switched my headset. For the record, this is Annabelle Drayton with the Northwest Energy Coalition. We submitted comments, but I thought for convenience, we would also just provide a quick high-level of our comments on interoperability or non-proprietary interoperability standards. We encourage the Washington State Department of Ag to really kind of follow 3 main principles that are outlined in this section, but for kind of further guidance, we hope that the standards will promote market competition in a manner consistent with RCW 1986-050, which is part of Washington's Consumer Protection Act, that they will safeguard site hosts from the risk of stranded assets. I think, site host choice is really important. And I also understand that, a lot of site hosts may not have the time or capacity to understand kind of all of the details of maybe a complicated contract. And so I think this is a place where these rules can support site host choice in the future as well, so that they're not stuck with hardware or a stranded asset because for one reason or another. And then the third principle would be to increase access and reliability for consumers. We think that this can be accomplished through 2 different interoperability standards. So we encourage Ag to adopt a standard that would require EVSPs to install and maintain communication protocols that enable roaming agreements. I think, this can be achieved by adopting California's OCPI requirement. And then the second one is that any EV charging station can interact or communicate with any network management system. So this is that hardware to software interoperability. We've provided potentially kind of like a framework in our comments of what that could look like, but essentially that it would be a requirement that the EVSE is technically capable and not contractually limited to operate on another EVSP's network. So we just want to promote market competition through some of those open standards. Again, all of this is in our comments, and appreciate the time to speak to us today.
Thank you, Annabelle. Michael?
Sorry, let me lower my hand. Well, I appreciate Annabelle's comments. And I'm gonna slightly pivot, so I don't want to detract from them. Excuse me. Tim, I still have a couple comments and questions. Tim, one, is this the first time stakeholders are seeing this particular image in the context of this slide deck? Yes. Okay. So I'll admit, I'm still digesting some of this, and I had the privilege of seeing it earlier when we met with the entity that provided this. So I think definitely giving space to folks to digest, because there is a substantial amount of information here, and it's not just text, but images and entities, a roaming platform, for example. So I do really want to encourage us that people got to stare at this and they got to digest it, figure out how it feels in them, and then provide comments. I'm hoping we can, maybe not today, maybe today, but I'll definitely make time for folks to look at this and then maybe provide comments into the future or revisit this at a future meeting. I know you and I have talked about setting aside time to come back to interoperability, and I think sharing this and having some shared images, and I would also welcome other stakeholders to provide visuals or other sort of tools that will help folks navigate what is otherwise a pretty obscure topic. I think that would be really helpful, because getting on the same page from a fundamental understanding of these different actors, for lack of a better term, like that very sassy EV driver, I don't know what pose they're striking versus the car versus the utility. I think having a shared understanding beyond the definitions and what's coming from the legislature, for example, would be really helpful. Second of all, something that I really would love to hear, and it came up in Annabelle's comments, is where in the US, it sounds like just California, have either mandated or strongly recommended, sorry everyone, adoption of interoperability standards like OCPI. I would love to hear from the EVSE companies how that went. What did they like about California's process, or any other state for that matter? What didn't they like? How is implementation going? I would love to hear some concrete stories. and some lessons learned. And then my final thing, sorry, I'm dumping a lot here, is I'm as someone who works in the utility space at Commerce, I'm really interested in the elements that are like the main line in this visual, which is from the bulk system operator down to the grid operator, which, you know, in the Northwest is mostly somewhat vertically integrated, all the way down to the charging side with ISO 15118. And having conversations with utilities about how do they feel about this? What is coming to mind? You know, and it's not really going to be an issue now, but potentially in maybe 5 years, certainly 10. And if anyone's familiar with the state energy strategy, we see that the load from EVs in the state grows to either the first or second largest load across 4 major sectors, and it's like just over a quarter. So that is a substantial amount of load that needs to be beneficially integrated from electric vehicles, not just cars, certainly medium and heavy duty. And I would love to have a discussion with utilities about what type of interoperability standards, plus any other tool or resource, will allow utilities or allow potentially grid operators, if Washington enters a more market-based system, or, you know, a deregulated system, for example, how are these tools, how would that enable beneficial integration to the grid, to customers, reliability issues, etc. So, and that last one maybe is something for a future discussion and have utilities ruminate on that. But I just wanted to name those few things that are on my mind right now, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Any other comments? And I saw Amy had popped up. There's an email. So Amy will be sending out the presentation after the meeting today. That way you guys don't have to go to our website, and we don't have to, it may take a while before it gets pushed and actually posted. So that way you guys could start reviewing it now while it's fresh in your mind. Okay. Yeah, so go ahead, we'll move on in just a minute, but basically kind of what we've been looking at is a lot of it has to do with the customer interface. And there's also been a lot of talk about keeping assets from getting stranded. And that's kind of along the lines of what we're looking at currently, but we definitely need input on that. Okay, Gloria, can you go to the next slide? And at any time, if we need to go back and discuss something, we can. But right now, so OCPI, which is Open Charge Point Interface, the EV Roaming Foundation's kind of taken this on. There is a need for it, and no one was there. So it's open source. It's non-proprietary, and you can kind of see the list. Right now, they're kind of, I think it's on version 2.2.1. They're working on a version 3 that has some added benefits to it. So there's some of the parameters on there. And one thing, there's kind of a couple things that we need to look at on this is, do we adopt a certain version of it? We cannot adopt the latest version. That, like, inside of our rules, we can't say that WSDA requires the latest version. We have to require in the rules, it would have to be a certain version. We can't just automatically adopt whatever new version comes out, or adopt a new version a year later or whatever. It has to be, if we do a version, it has to be that version, and then we'd have to go back and update the rules whenever a new version comes out that we want to adopt. Now, there's also the potential that we could adopt, instead of saying a version, we could adopt certain requirements that basically would encompass all the things that OCPI would be offering that we're trying to actually establish. And that way, if something ever happened to OCPI, if it goes somewhere else, it could potentially still be used. Or if another standard comes out and OCPI goes away, it gives the flexibility that we've kind of been hearing about a little bit. And then on top of all that, there's also certified versus compliant. Because from my understanding, some devices will be certified by like a third party, where other devices, the device manufacturer or whoever's doing it will say that their device or their software or whatever is compliant with OCPI. And this would also apply to OCPP or any of the other standards that we might look at. So that's another part of the discussion about the requirement of being certified versus compliant to make sure it actually works and doesn't just kind of work, or if there's any issues along that. And then that image is basically the same image from before, just with all the extra, without the extra little boxes on it, so it's a little bit cleaner. And so is there any comments or questions? My understanding is California's basically copied and pasted the OCPI protocol as their standard and they're required. So I don't know how people also feel like that's another option too, potentially, is that we may have to copy and paste it. They did that for my understanding, some legal reasons on their end. They had to do that and remove some references and whatnot. So I'd like to hear from the community how well this is working and not working as far as California, and then any other recommendations. Jay asked if we can have language that says OCPI 2.2 or later. I would have to look into that. The later part, there's a chance that may not be possible, because essentially that looks like is if something changes, we don't have any authority to make sure that that's going on. Glorianne, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so we would not be able to word it in that way. We have to specify exactly the version that we are adopting. And then if we wanted to move on to another version, we would have to go back through the rulemaking process and adopt the next version that we want to adopt. As Tim mentioned, the other option, rather than just referencing OCPI 2.2 that we're adopting it, we would actually grab the language that we want to have in our rule and put that actual language in there. So it would be the whole paragraph, the whole written out text of what we want to adopt. So it's somewhat easier just to reference the standard that you're adopting, whether it's OCPI or a different standard that we might adopt, but it would have to specify the exact version.
Andrew?
Thanks, Tim. So this is Andrew Rector, Washington, UTC. I guess maybe just kind of a procedural question, I suppose, since I'm not super familiar with the way that you guys kind of do things over at AG. For perspective, one thing that we do at the UTC is every year we go through and do a streamlined adoption by reference rulemaking, where we basically just kind of go through all of the rules that we have on the books, see where we have adopted specific standards or anything like that, and just kind of go through and see, okay, is the specific standard that we've adopted still the most up-to-date version or something like that? Or is there a new one that has been replaced? And if so, we can just tweak the language real quick to do a replacement like that. I don't know if that's something that Department of Agriculture has the capability or regularly does, but if you do, it could solve this particular problem. So like, again, every year, for instance, you could go back and see, is there a version 3 of OCPI that has been released? And if so, just kind of do the rules that way. Anyway, that's just kind of food for thought. I guess I'm kind of guessing you don't have the capability to do that, but maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know about capability, but as far as I know, we don't do that. We have we have the NIST handbooks that we adopt, and then there's some food safety standards I know the agency adopts, and other stuff that is kind of each one's individual from my understanding.
Yeah, Tim, I would have to agree with you that it's not about capability. I mean, obviously we have the capability to go back and amend any rule at any point. It's not our current practice to go back to all of our rules every single year to do it that way, just because of the huge variation of the different programs under our agency. Each of the different programs kind of focus within themselves of when they need to update their rules or not. So yeah, just because the huge variation under the agency, we do it a little bit more piecemeal than what it sounds like you guys do.
Yeah. The other challenging thing I know, at least with like for when we adopt NIST handbooks, and I could also potentially see this applying to that is there's several, for the NIST handbooks, there's several modifications we have because it conflicts with Washington state statutes, or potentially just kind of where what Washington's trying to do. So every time we update it, we have to go through and literally look at every single change and determine if that's something that we need to address or not on those changes. And then if something's changed in the statutes, we also need to make sure that it doesn't affect what we've adopted in the past, that doesn't have to get changed either. And because of that, there is modifications that we usually have upon adoption of those items that we have to address every time. So it's a process that we have to go through.
Fair enough. I guess we at the UTC have perhaps a slightly narrower purview, so it might be easier for us to do than you.
All right. We'll get to you just in a minute, Justin. Glorianne, there's a question about when will the video be posted. I figured you'd probably be better at answering that than me.
The video for this meeting?
Yeah, and even last meeting, probably gonna.
Yes, so it should be posted within the next couple days. The video for last meeting got posted last week, I believe, and all of the comments that we've received up until Monday got posted on the website this morning. And so I know that there were a couple other comments that were submitted late last night, and so those will get posted soon, as well as the video and the presentation here. We'll post all of that.
Thank you. Justin?
Thanks, Tim. This is more of a question. I just wanted to, the version conversation, I just want to make sure that I understand it to inform comments later. So if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is any regulations are going to have to identify a very specific version, or in those regulations, kind of cut and paste the text from that version or a subset of that text. You can't one broadly say this protocol or say this protocol version X or later. Am I hearing that correct? Okay.
That's correct.
I'll just, and this may go against Michael's request, but I would say that that is a unique piece to me, and trying to think through it from the perspective of a company trying to operate in multiple states on multiple continents, with different protocols. When we manufacture products or do software updates, we're generally doing those for everybody. And so if there's protocols in one part of the world or one part of the United States that might have one version or a different version, and it could just lead, I think, to some confusion for the companies trying, who may be trying to operate within these standardized protocols. I think we're seeing that a little bit, and that, I think to address some of the concerns that have been raised around grid management and those sorts of things, the technology is moving really quickly, but our regulatory systems move a little bit more slowly. So I really appreciate whomever, listed that particular kind of nuance of this, and thanks for the clarification.
Right. Yeah. And there is a slim possibility that we might be able to also do borders, like make a box of these are all the requirements that you have to use in a protocol or standard that meets this definition, and basically define what would essentially be OCPI per se. There is some of my personal concerns on that as a regulator is that makes it a lot harder for us to regulate that. And then there's also potentially some legal aspects of us actually trying to do that. There is a slim chance of being able to do that, but it would definitely have to be well defined, and it would take a lot of work, I think, to be able to do that. But if there's some really good options or ideas that people have, that is something that we could potentially look at. Like I said, it does create its own set of challenges to do that.
And Tim, can I touch in on that as well?
Yeah.
So if we were to just do that general reference to, for instance, OCPI 2.2, just because we can't put it in the rule language that we're adopting that standard or later, or later versions, doesn't mean that the manufacturers, all of the businesses that are involved with trying to implement those requirements, doesn't mean that they can't move on to implementing the advanced requirements in the OCPI standards. So it just, when we put that into our rule language, that becomes the baseline. And usually what we see with other industry type standards that we adopt is that when new versions come out, they're more refined, they're more restrictive in some ways, they're more fine-tuned. They're not very often are they less restrictive than a previous version of their standards. So if we were to adopt a specific version of that standard, it would just need to, that's what we would be regulating against. And if a company decided, okay, I meet all of the OCPI 2.2 standards, but the version 3 has come out now, and under that version they have these additional things, parts of their protocol that they're requiring. We're going to go ahead and make those changes, and it might be good practice to do that just so that you're ahead of the game. If we were to amend our rules to adopt the new version, then you're already there. But having 2.2 in our rule would just make that the baseline. It doesn't prevent you guys from moving forward as long as you're meeting that baseline in our rule. Hope that, Justin, helps clarify things maybe, or maybe I made things more confusing. I'm not sure.
Well, I would just say, I mean, I think I understand that in the sense of kind of a traditional, and I know agriculture has many different functions, but in the context of, like, say, a traditional weights and measures kind of tolerance, kind of function, I think. When, I think when it does come to softwares, oftentimes things are not always backwards compatible. And so that's a little bit different of so you could end up in a situation where, you have a software protocol, call it 1.1, and 2.0 is actually would be a further progression of that software. However, it's not backwards compatible with 1.0. So I think that's how it operates slightly differently, and might not be the same way that the Department of Ag is used to dealing with the progression of the standards.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that you're right. This is a different territory that we're entering into as an agency and trying to wrap our minds around. So if we can get more details about how that all works from you guys, that would really help us in considering these type of things. Yeah, like if you have set examples that you can give us, that would be great.
And that might be something that it's definitely take a lot of work, because from my understanding is we legally can't adopt by the latest version or later. It's basically how, like, there's other statutes and stuff that require us to, or at least how they've interpreted certain statutes, that we can't just go and adopt the latest version, because it essentially is relegating our rulemaking authority to another organization outside of us, without us actually having any control over it. So if that is an issue, that's something that might have to be addressed through another means to be able to actually fix that. But if it is an issue, let us know so we can make sure it's addressed. Go ahead and go to Annabelle.
Thanks, Tim. I have a question and then potentially a follow-up, depending on the answer. So what's the frequency for kind of updating NIST standards in Washington State?
It's a loaded question. We try to do it every 2 years, but due to various multiple reasons, we are right now 5 years behind. But the goal is every 2-3 years max is what we'd prefer.
Okay, that's helpful. I mean, one thing that maybe I'd like to put out for consideration is adopting California's OCPI standards by reference, and as they update them, you know, that would provide some just maybe a little bit more like ease for ag in that process. I think so. That's just one thing to consider. And then also the SB 5192 does allow ag to update every 2 years. So as it, you know, as those timelines could work out with other rulemakings, you know, maybe that is a possibility. So open to feedback there, but just wanted to throw something like that out.
Yeah, from my understanding, to adopt California's section, that would be a no-go because it's essentially allowing California to do our rulemaking for us and for our citizens.
I just want to let folks know that we do that in plenty of other places. For instance, we adopt like California's kind of Title 13 like motor vehicle emission standards quite frequently by reference.
Yeah, so Annabelle, it would be the exact same thing as if we were to adopt the OCPI. We have to state a specific version that we're adopting. So it would have to be like a specific date that the rule, if we're adopting their rule, which published rule are you adopting? We can't just say whatever's currently out there is what we follow to. We can't do that. So because yeah, again, when they then update their rule, as Tim mentioned, it gives our rulemaking authority, our regulatory authority basically over to them to update their rule whenever they want to and change things however they want to, and then we have no say in it. So that's where it all comes from. It's whether we adopt OCPI in that specific version of that, or the ISO rule, or California's rule, it always comes down to we have to adopt a specific version or a specific date of the release of that, you know.
Okay, but you could adopt California's at, you know, X date, and if they change that, then ag would have to obviously respond accordingly, whether or not they wanted to adopt again or move forward with a different protocol.
Yes.
Thank you.
Eric?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Appreciate the discussion on the topic, and just wanted to add Greenlot's thoughts and perspective on this specific piece of interoperability pertaining to enabling driver roaming and a payment interoperability through roaming standards, no CPI specifically. We're fairly satisfied with California's approach on this and think that Washington can more or less clone that approach, understanding that it might need to be massaged to some degree to meet the legal framework that, Tim, you've been mentioning. It's also worth noting that California's action and regulation in the space is already directly benefiting every other jurisdiction, including Washington. CARB's actions has already resulted in a number of roaming agreements among many EVSPs, Greenlots included. And it's not as if those roaming agreements are circumscribed or bound into a certain state. So I would even go so far as saying that whether or not Washington State regulates in the specific space, it's still going to receive the benefit and is receiving the benefit because CARB has already moved. And it looks like we have some representatives from CARB on the call right now that might be able to provide some additional perspective about their approach and what they've done. Don't want to put them on the spot, but that's kind of some important perspective on this one piece of interoperability. I think it's fairly safe space to do what California did, while noting that either way, the benefits are already being realized in Washington and elsewhere. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments on this section? Hold on, I'm just reading through the comments. All right, and go to the next slide. Well, Michael, did you want to say something?
Yeah, Tim, thanks. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to express our support, for OCPI. We've heard some comments expressing concern about how it would be implemented. And so I just wanted to offer the counterpoint that the Alliance for Transportation Electrification believes that OCPI is a very important foundational standard. And although the statute limits your ability to require commercial entities to enter into relationships, nonetheless, requiring the service providers to possess the capability will be very important, because it will facilitate such commercial relationships as the parties see fit to do over time. So we believe that this is a very important element of the rulemaking procedure. So thank you for this opportunity to comment on it.
Thank you for that, Michael. All right, seeing no other comments, I'm going to move on to OCPP. So I'm not going to go ahead and read through all this. You guys probably understand the OCPP. I pulled this off of their fact sheet. You can read through it if you want. More just any comments as far as industry or even our other stakeholders, whether if this causes issues or the benefits for this and whatnot. Anything else around that? Justin?
Yeah, I just wanted at the outset for clarification, just wanted to say that despite the name Open Charge Point Protocol, OCPP doesn't have any formal relationship with ChargePoint. It's just a naming convention, more common to say a charge point in the Netherlands. And so although your slide here, I think, is correct, it's a network management system that can communicate with operators. I just want to make sure that distinction was clear for folks who might not be aware.
Actually, thank you so much for that, because I was just wondering that yesterday.
Very good. Yeah, and I would say I'm not that particular fact sheet I haven't looked at in a little bit, and just as we've been chatting about, there's things that change on these protocols from time to time. I'm happy to take a look at that fact sheet and see if it needs updating.
Okay. Yeah, that's one reason I wasn't still not fully comprehending OCPP. I barely comprehend somewhat of what OCPI is. And that's why I'm just gonna throw this as what's on the fact sheet and no guarantees that it's correct. And there's the fact sheet website if you want to access it. Annabelle?
Thanks, Tim. I actually want to raise a significant concern that it doesn't appear as though this is a fact sheet from OCPP, but instead is a fact sheet from ChargePoint, who is a specific charging provider. And I think it would be prudent to update this slide when it's updated to the website to acknowledge that this is not information from OCPP. because I find this slide very misleading. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you. Yeah, the interesting thing is I think I got to the slide from OCPP's website. Michael?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Michael Krauthammer here from the Alliance for Transportation Electrification. And I just want to echo and perhaps even amplify Annabelle's comments. My recommendation is that before you post these slides, that you actually remove this slide. And I'm sure that all of the stakeholders, including ChargePoint, will be very happy to send you information on this, so that you can present the information differently.
That'd be helpful. I would like to see the information, so.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Eric?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Well, while we're just kind of noting corrections to the slide, which has a number of inaccuracies, I'll just highlight that the second bullet point on the right side is just flat out incorrect, right? There is a third-party certification process to the OCPP protocol that's been in existence for almost 2 years now at this point, including at least one lab in the United States. So just going to note that piece right now. I'll also note that a lot of the information on the slide also pertains to OCPI, which is also not a standard, but that does not prevent it being used readily in the marketplace and regulators requiring it, such as CARB has done. So I'll just leave it right there for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Jay?
Sorry, I think I got in the queue on this one. So where you got this information was from Wikipedia, or actually, Terry, I take that back. Actually, you got it from, if you did a Google search. When you do a Google search, the first thing that pops up in the definitions is ChargePoint's slide or ChargePoint's definition and their fact sheet. But it is inaccurate, and you need to refer to the EV roaming Foundation as the authoritative definitions on what OCPP is. So, and I gotta say this to Justin, shame on you, because this is not okay. And I mean, I know it's propaganda, but it's just not acceptable. Okay, that's my comment.
I would say that Justin right off the bat said he was going to have his company look at that because I think he recognized that it was not accurate.
And we do appreciate that, but yeah, I mean, it should come down from ChargePoint side as well.
Justin?
Yeah, I want to be very, clear here. We did not, I believe, send this to Tim. I believe that there are things on here that continue, as Eric mentioned, continue to be true. When I saw this slide pop up, I went and tried to make that disclaimer. This is a changing environment, and things that may have been true at one point in time may change. I tried to make that disclaimer. I don't think shame needs to be placed on anybody, especially a company trying to go out and install this EV infrastructure. We're here as good, honest participants in this process that want to see this market succeed. So again, I just want to draw everybody's attention to the fact that I am trying to provide the right disclaimers here, and happy to follow up with anybody who has some concerns. But as I noted, this is a changing market, and things that are on the web live out there beyond when things change sometimes.
All right, now that we got that all straightened out, is there any actual comments on OCPP itself? whether it's something that we should be looking at adopting, if there's parts of it that we should look at anything along that lines of what we should actually be doing. Jay?
Sure, I'll start out this this salvo in terms of I think that the big advantage of OCPP is that what it does is it basically helps avoid stranded assets. Typically we've seen OCPP referenced in, say, grant programs, but we, because the idea behind that is if for some reason one network operator were to go out of business, and this has actually happened with funding that happened from the original era, basically ChargePoint and Blink were the two companies that got funded, and Blink in essence ceased to exist. The advantage of that is another network operator could come in and operate those stations. And so that's the real tremendous advantage for that. It also, while site hosts are often, as Annabelle mentioned, and I want to sort of concur, are not necessarily sophisticated about this, it may be the kind of thing where if, for example, this in essence promotes competition or potential competition amongst the EVSPs and creates for sort of a more fluid market. So, and I know that that's a potential advantage, and it can help site hosts, reduce fees and have better consumer protection. So we think it's a very, very important thing. It's a real robust, standard. And in fact, I believe going to ChargePoint's website recently, I think in 2014 they issued a press release that they were supporting it, and I think they were both one of the first and one of the last to actually do that. So I think that if you look at where the market has moved toward, this is sort of a very capable and open standard and worth adopting in the regulations. And again, we encourage California to do it, and they did that. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
This is Annabelle, again with the Northwest Energy Coalition.
Yeah.
This is highlighted in our comments, but I think that there's a way to achieve achieve the same thing that like OCPP achieves without specifically naming a version of OCPP potentially. And that's outlined in our comments, and would encourage folks to take a look at them as well. And just wanted to again voice support for some sort of hardware to, like a meaningful hardware to software protocol included in, or requirement included in the rule, because I do think that it is the place of this rulemaking to step in and basically create an environment in which site hosts and consumers in Washington feel like protected and like, this is a good investment for them.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. And Michael had a comment about having a future session on OCPP. And I think it's definitely, I think we're going to have to probably have another meeting at some point about interoperability as a whole, as we get more information and kind of have some different options and get together. But I think before we have that meeting, we kind of need to definitely get more input, and we need to kind of have maybe a couple different options on how we want to attack that, so we can actually have a productive meeting that kind of gives us more direction on the way we need to go, and not just discuss the pros and cons of them. Michael?
Hey, Tim. Yeah, thanks. Michael Krauthammer here from the Alliance for Transportation Electrification. So I've seen a couple questions in the chat, including Michael's, suggesting a cooling off period, which I understand people get a little bit excited about these topics, but I think that everybody understands that it was just an innocent misunderstanding to put that slide in there, and it sounds like everybody's back on track So, with that said, certainly everybody's always happy to talk later, but just to clarify, in response to some questions, again, OCPP is it's almost like it's like a consumer protection type of capability, so that not only are chargers not left stranded in the event the network operator goes away, but also, just to offer another example, if someone buys a charger, and that someone could be, a homeowner or an apartment building or office building manager just buying a handful of chargers, or a large corporation or a utility buying hundreds or thousands of chargers, what OCPP offers like a capability or for a charger to communicate with multiple networks. So you might think about it almost like your wall outlet, like the receptacle in your wall, every lamp can plug into it. If you don't like, one lamp, you could buy another lamp and the lamp will plug into the outlet. Think about that as like networks on chargers. If you want to switch networks, you need to make sure that the next network can talk to your charger. So that's sort of like a rough analogy to OCPP. There is another deeper aspect to OCPP, which is that the contracts and the intellectual property commitments have to also enable the charger to be ported from one network to the next, which is sort of like a cell phone, being locked versus unlocked. But just at a very basic level, I hope that this description has clarified or explained or illustrated more about the purpose of OCPP. It's so that, like I said, you can shop for networks. It fosters competition between networks, because if chargers are OCPP compliant, networks are aware that they have to maintain their quality of service, otherwise their customer may go somewhere else, as opposed to being locked in to a single vendor. With that said, in relation to the other protocols that are listed on the slide here, they're all different. They offer features and other capabilities, but they're not, and they offer conveniences and certainly value in one way or another, but they are different from OCPP in that OCPP can literally lock you to a single vendor, whereas these others are more feature-rich capabilities. So I think it's important to keep them in different buckets from each other. Keep OCPI, OCPP, very important fundamental capabilities. These protocols we're looking at now are a little bit different. So thanks for the opportunity to comment on this.
All right, thanks. Yeah, we'll move this slide in a second. I think we're just trying to get off the other slide that I put up there that was incorrect. So is there any more comments on OCPP? Eric?
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, I'll just add Greenlot's kind of perspective on this topic, and how we'd like to see the market evolve, and whereas strong proponents of promoting competition in the marketplace and being able to ensure for ongoing competition for a certain site host or client's business, right? And what that means fundamentally is being able to compete for a site host business after they purchase hardware, right? We don't want to see a marketplace where as soon as a certain potential client or site host buys a certain vendor's hardware, that they are locked into eternity to using that vendor's software network services. We want to see ongoing competition and ongoing consumer choices, right? So I think a very kind of core foundational piece of this rulemaking overall, and I'd even say probably the most important part of this rulemaking overall, is doing something to help enable that. OCPP is the leading protocol out there that enables that sort of interoperability and that sort of consumer switching ability. And I'll note that there's been evolving ways to ensure the marketplace is compliant against that protocol. Also note that there's different ways that ag could go about addressing this. There could be a protocol-specific requirement, which we'd be supportive of. We also suggested a protocol-agnostic way of attempting to ensure this sort of flexibility in the marketplace. And just to kind of rewind things a bit here, I'll note that during the legislative process, the main detractor of this sort of interoperability, lobbied very hard to have this Section 6 gutted, to not have this be a consideration during the rulemaking process. And the legislature dismissed that entirely. So straight from the ability to act on both the letter of the law and the clear intent of the legislature, doing something with respect to enabling hardware and software interoperability is very important. And whether that's done through a specific protocol or through a protocol agnostic approach, that I think that's open for debate. But what is unacceptable is not doing something in this space. So those are Greenlot's high-level thoughts and comments on this specific but very important piece of interoperability, for the reasons others have articulated, and for those additional reasons. So excited to engage in this conversation going forward and see where this goes. But I just kind of want to set those high-level thoughts from our perspective. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the slide that's currently showing. So this is kind of not as focused of what we're looking at, but these are items that have kind of been brought up by various people. So I just wanted to bring them up for discussion and just have them out there, so that way if that's something that we do need to look into, that we do, and we just don't push it aside. So that's the smart charging, open smart charging protocol, the ISO 15118, which is kind of the plug and charge stuff that some of the newer high-end cars are coming out with, and then the open ADR for demand response charging. And then kind of in that, if there's just any benefits of those being adopted, just like to hear them. Annabelle?
Thanks. Just on ISO 15118, which I do not pretend to be an expert on at all. My understanding of it is that there's some overlap with both interoperability and like payment method requirements. I think that it's my understanding that like what ag is here to do is really kind of adopt like minimum standards throughout, like from the whole bill, both payment method interoperability, price transparency, things like that. And so I just don't see the need at this point for there to be any requirement around ISO 15118. I think any charging provider can choose to do that for both kind of the payment method ease and the interoperability side of things. So I guess what I'm saying is that it seems premature to adopt or include a requirement for plug and charge.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's a lot of the stuff I feel is premature at this time, but I want to get the discussion and definitely get people's input, especially if everyone is on the same page as saying, yeah, we don't need to address this. Then we know we don't have to worry about discussing it any further. Kelsey?
Thanks, Tim. Kelsey Johnson with Rivian here. And I think I'd like to maybe bring us back to one of the initial questions you asked at the beginning of the call, which was all about the definition of kind of the scope of what we're talking about here. And I think you've gathered, through the slides that you've shown today, as well as through the comments that you received, that the majority of the industry is focusing on OCPP and OCPI. I think that original image you showed obviously shows a handful of other things, some of which are listed on this screen here, that I think, kind of in line with what Annabelle said on 15.11.8, potentially are largely out of scope at this point, largely because they're just not mature enough to really be able to require them one way or the other. So would just like to echo kind of the underlying message there that Annabelle noted. while also noting that, yeah, definitely all worth discussing, but probably not at this time at this point.
Thank you. Jay?
Sorry, shoot, I was trying to make sure I was off mute. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of add as well, it seems like if you start looking at OSPC and 15118 and even things like OpenADR, I guess our take would be that those are beyond the scope of the rulemaking that you're looking at right now, that it's, that it's sort of more focused, that 15118, I think, could play a major role in the future. But it's probably not yet ready for prime time you'll hear different things from different folks, but the level of adoption that it's at the current time and as you're looking toward the future. But I would certainly consider it, recommend considering it for a future rulemaking. As far as OSCP and again OpenADR, I think those are really involved with the interaction with utilities. And again, it's probably they're important protocols to consider in your large chart as you had. But I think again, relative to this particular rulemaking, it's about sort of core interoperability, which is the OCPP side and the OCPI. So that would be our comments on that.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? All right, go to the next slide, please. All right, so this is kind of just all the rest of the stuff that wasn't talked about. Locked hardware kind of relates to the OCPP and having that go, but this is more of also even locked. I was kind of thinking along the lines of like your cell phone's locked in until you pay for it kind of thing. If stuff like that needs to be addressed, the vendor lock-in would be really more OCPP type stuff to allow that. But if there is any regulation as far as contractual wise, a lot of this stuff, I don't know if we'd necessarily even have authority, but just want to put it out there for discussion. And then charging plug, which I really don't see happening, but again, it's been brought up. So just throwing this out there if there's any comments on any of the stuff that anyone wants to make. All right, and that's it for our discussion on interoperability itself. Like I said before, if there's any comments hoping you have some more comments that you guys want to provide, some input, at any time, you're more than welcome to email those to us. Or if you want to call and talk to us, we can also discuss it if it's easier to discuss. I know a lot of this stuff is very complicated, so we're still trying to learn a lot on this whole process. Glorian, can you go to the next slide? So as a reminder, register your devices. If you have any questions on that, I have a screenshot guide from Department of Licensing on how to kind of go through that process. I'm not sure exactly how helpful it is. I've emailed it to a couple people. I haven't received whether or not it worked or not. So if there's any questions on that, just let me know, or any feedback. I'd like to hear about it. All right, next slide. Back for you, Amy.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So I just quickly wanted to remind everyone that we have our next meeting is on September 29th, and that's going to be meeting 3. And we're going to be talking about fees and reporting. Also, I sent out an additional request for input for meeting 3. I sent that out yesterday. So if you guys could provide input, we would greatly appreciate it. And like Tim said, feel free to keep sending us comments related to this meeting's topic. We'll definitely consider all of that as we work through the rulemaking process. And then I also just wanted to remind folks again, if you have any questions or if you want to find the presentation recordings and things like that, you can just visit our website. All that information is posted up there, as well as the comments that we've been receiving. So next slide. Yeah, and I guess are there any kind of final questions or thoughts before we finish for today? Doesn't sound like it. Next slide. All right. Yeah, so if you guys have any questions, you can always reach out to us. Tim's contact information is up there on the screen. And yeah, that's pretty much it for today. We really appreciate you guys jumping on the call and providing all of your input. It sounds like we're getting a lot of really great information. So thank you. And hopefully we'll see you at the next meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.